And another way to put that is no utility is the best utility.
Welcome to Decentralized Dawn, where lifelong friends Chicago and Disco navigate the ever-evolving crypto landscape. With genuine curiosity and a commitment to nuance as our North Star, we offer clear-eyed exploration. Our goal? To empower listeners with the tools and insights needed to flourish in this decentralized age.
I love this music. It's always so soothing to start a podcast with it. Hello, everybody. I am Blutoshi. I used to call myself Chicago, and I switched it to Blutoshi. Why? Who cares? It's a fun name, and I like it. And I got a little blue PFP to back it up. On my right is Disco.
Hello, and I'm sticking with Disco for the time being. I'm not sure why, but there it is. So yeah, forgive me if I stumble at all and go with the Chicago, but I'm on board with the Blutoshi movement, and consider yourself a big supporter of the Blutoshi transition.
Well, I appreciate that. Nice. And another big important thing for everybody out there, we are subtly switching the name and the branding as I think we're in episode 20 or something. We've been doing this about 3 months. We're still, just figuring stuff out, figure out the best formula we like, and hint, don't worry, all the long form won't change because we love going deep on stuff and weaving patterns together. But we're going to change the name of the show and make it simpler so we don't have to say Decentralized Dawn all the time. It's too long. We're going to change it and simplify it to Decentral Lens. And we can thank a fellow pal of ours who we both grew up with, Gooch, if you're out there and listening, this show's for you. But because we changed the name of these specific news shows to Decentral Lens, and we figured that's just a simpler name for the overall show, because that's what we do. We love decentralization. We don't want to take that away, but Decentral Lens is a nice look into cryptocurrencies, AI, and just the decentralized trends that make this world hopefully a better place.
Yeah, and we like the aspect of lens, because at the core of what we're trying to do to differentiate from the other organizations out there, the news, kind of the news media that covers crypto, is we want to use the lens to kind of have that be our perspective and our, kind of critical view of the news and the stories, and trying to create kind of a moat against the shilling and against kind of the influencers, and look at things from the most kind of nuanced and balanced perspective. So we thought that played well. We're not gonna beat it at, go too deep telling you guys, hey, we really did it because of this. We think it flows great. Right. I got tired of trying to type like Decentralized Dawn into too many things. So I was an advocate for shortening it for sure. So yeah, there'll be a couple changes over the next couple of weeks as we transition there, but just a heads up to everybody. And again, I know we don't want to be shillers, and we don't want to be, self-promotion, but we are trying to maintain a fierce sense of independence as we build the show and the brand. So, anything you guys could do in terms of spreading the word and in terms of subscribing, liking, commenting, anything from that perspective, it means a bunch to us. So if you don't mind, clicking and doing anything to support, we'd be happy to see that happen.
Yep, absolutely. Subscribe, please. And if you have any ideas for a show, or you're an expert on something, want to come in and it fits with what we're trying to do with cryptocurrencies, AI maybe to a lesser extent, but really decentralization as a whole, please let us know and give us comments, because we love the feedback and we love doing the show. On today's show, we're going to go in, the Bitcoin ETF is still young and new, and it's still like everything's kind of settling out. So we're going to talk about that. We're going to touch on Coinbase, in this case, dismissal. We're going to talk about what else we got, Disco. There's a Decon upgrade for ETH. We're going to just touch on, there's so much stuff going on here. But those are the big ones. Any other big ones that I missed?
No, we'll talk. We're not a political show, but we may touch just a little bit on kind of some of the political stories that are tied directly to, crypto overall. And then what we'd like to do, as we say, we're kind of like basket weavers, or hope to be, in terms of weaving things back into place. So I'm sure at some point we'll go back and touch on a few things that broke, that tied to some of the content and the issues or the episodes that we've done prior. So I'm excited. I think it's going to be a great show.
Yeah. We love tying everything together, because these stories are not in a vacuum. And again, that's why we started this show, because there's so many shows, and, the bigger these shows get, the more the more advertising they have, which is totally fine. And, if you're making good money and doing the show and kind of keeping that independent spirit, that's a great thing. But, what we've seen with a lot of shows, you can probably guess which ones in particular, it kind of loses its independent spirit, and it starts to feel like you're getting shilled what this company owns or who their sponsors are. So we're really trying to avoid that at all costs and just give it to you straight, do the research because we love this space, and try and let you make the best decisions you can make based on the information, and not necessarily telling you what to do, but presenting the information in the most unbiased way.
Yeah, I think that's an accurate assessment of our goal and intent. So, I don't know.
Cool.
Why don't we dip into it? And I use the term dip because if you looked at the overall markets over the past, 72-ish hours, there's been a little activity overall to the downside. And, we've always been talking about, what's going to happen when these seminal events come through. And it's been very interesting to kind of see the settlement happen after, the ETF approval kind of, launched this whole new batch of ETF opportunities for folks to get into Bitcoin. We were initially looking at kind of how who's winning the king of the hill, the top of the mountain from the different trusts and the different funds, and how that all played out. And then we're seeing just kind of an overall impact on not only the Bitcoin price, but also a heck of a lot of impact on some of the other altcoins and currencies. So it's just an interesting kind of scene to navigate.
Yeah. So starting with the Bitcoin ETF, we've got day 8 of total flows of the ETF. So remember, there's 11 total. GBTC, Grayscale Bitcoin Trust, had already had $26 billion. It was not set up very well. Because it was a trust, but now that is a ETF as well. We've seen the outflows almost at $4 billion now. Now, one interesting thing we know is that FTX, the bankruptcy proceedings, had about $1 billion in Bitcoin in the GBTC trust, and that has been taken out. And I believe there might be a little more, but I think they're pretty much clean and have taken out everything that they are going to do for the bankruptcy proceeding. So obviously when GBTC turned over to an ETF, they knew that discount to NAV would go back to more parity with Bitcoin. So it was probably a smart time for them to get out. So that represents about a quarter of all the outflows of GBTC at about $4 billion, right? So the net after 8 days is GBTC down $4 billion. iShares Bitcoin Trust, which is BlackRock, has about $1.85 billion. So they've amassed quite a bit of a war chest here. Fidelity coming at number 2 at $1.6 billion. So those guys are neck and neck. And then there's a big gap. Bitwise is third with $518 million. And then ARCB is $509 million. Invesco Galaxy goes to $263 million, and then the last ones, Van Eck, Valerie Franklin, Wisdom Tree, are all in the millions. So they're lagging way behind. It's early. These guys probably have whole networks they haven't even tapped into as people get stuff approved. But as Disco said, price of Bitcoin went from about 47, 48 in the peak anticipation of the ETFs getting released, 10 days ago or whatever it was. And now we're down right at 40,000. I think we even clipped 38. So there's been, the net inflow outflow of GBTC out and all the rest in is still plus just under $1 billion. So that's not a bad haul for a week or two. But given the GBTC outflows, that number would obviously look stronger because the other 10 who are brand new are net up. What would that be, like $4 billion or something? So I'm sorry, no, it'd be like $5 billion. So, I mean, we're talking a lot of money here.
It's just, it's frustrating that we still have to, factor in FTX on all these things. It's like, I wish we could just, have that completely in the rear view. It tends to keep popping back up, but it's just fascinating because I don't think that, there's ever been, a launch of a ETF or financial product to if you really think of it that way, that's had this much scrutiny on it. It's like there's whole,
Right.
there's whole teams. It's like breaking news, like how often we hear about, net inflows, outflows to ETFs. And here it's become like its own little cottage, journalism and industry watching it. And again, it's like, my take is it's very exciting because, as we've always said, once the train leaves the station, and as Blutoshi's often referenced, the toothpaste is out of the tube, it's tough to get it back in. And I definitely felt that sense on approval day when immediately you saw it, start sniffing 50,000, and you're like, am I ever going to be able to, acquire more at a decent price? So this settlement is, it going down, it does, I think, provide a nice opportunity, kind of a last call, so to speak. You don't have to go home, but you can't stay here. But, this might be the one time that you really have kind of that last chance to get in. And if we didn't have the grayscale and the GBTC in play, could you imagine what that would have done to the price and to where things are at? So it's almost like we have to deal with a headwind on that. And then once that's all settled out, it'll be really exciting to see, what actually happens on the upward side.
So I think with a fixed supply Bitcoin, there will be a squeeze. It just hasn't happened yet. And as you said, Disco, grayscale going down and probably being swapped into these other asset classes, or even, taken for a little cash, like FTX getting it off the table, is just a short-term headwind. But I think between that and all the interest that will probably take time to go through board approvals and stuff, it's out there and it's available to very easily now to companies, institutions, and financial advisors and everybody on Main Street USA. And remember too, Hong Kong, now that we've approved ours, it looks like they want to speed an approval up there for early as first quarter 24, which, for the Pacific Rim, and I don't know how much China can invest in Hong Kong stocks, but it certainly puts it in all corners of the world, the huge financial centers of Hong Kong, and then, here with New York and America. So.
And just kind of a funny side point that I think those of us that have become accustomed to the pace with which things move in the crypto ecosystem, and just how quickly, like, once you start transferring money or bridging tokens or doing whatever you're doing, we're so used to the immediacy of it. And we're so used to, like, we have such a short attention span on all this stuff. And we have to realize that we're dealing with, organizations where if you just wanted to make a withdrawal from a Fidelity or whatever, I've dealt with that day to day where it takes, 4 to 5 days, and you're sitting there like, why can't I just have it now? And I think that we're sitting there like almost, so not used to action not happening so quickly that we're almost inventing, scenarios of negativity that I don't think are necessarily justified if you take a step back and look at just the pure numbers. And the amount going in, I believe, is unprecedented to a new product or new asset class. So we got to just kind of pull back, chill out, look at things as opportunities to, kind of get a last chance purchase and let this thing play out a bit.
Yeah, and the iShares Bitcoin Trust, again, BlackRock and Fidelity's FBTC, are already among the top 10 traded ETFs. And ETF is obviously probably the most popular vehicles now, way over mutual funds. So, I mean, that's huge. Both of those to be in the top 10 with the QQQs and all the volatility indexes and stuff like that within a week or two is massive. So it will probably take a while, but obviously, like Disco said, we remain quite bullish on just dollar cost averaging in and accumulating. And the beauty of Bitcoin getting knocked down, the crown jewel, if you will, it knocked ETH down, it knocked Solana down, it knocked, all the shit coins down. And it might, if there's things you're looking at or interested in, this might be a buying opportunity. I'm kind of trying to see where the grayscale, yesterday, or I'm sorry, Monday, Grayscale, the amount out actually outpaced. It was the first day where the net flows were slightly down, because the outflows I think were 500 million and the inflows were like 463 million. It was almost parity, but the outflows were a hair more. So people are panicking. But remember, these things are you have to redeem them. I believe on a +1 or even a +2. I think a lot of people are confused. So at some point the BlackRocks and the Fidelities, they're gobbling up a lot of Bitcoin. Now, whether Bitcoin is good to be held by en masse on Wall Street, that game will remain to be seen. I think the best quote I heard this week is Bitcoin playing and owning Wall Street, or is Wall Street playing and owning Bitcoin? And that's a tough one. That's a tough one to answer. I don't know what the answer is. My thing is like Bitcoin is indifferent and doesn't care, but I guess we've seen Wall Street leverage things and overpaper things on derivatives where the same underlying asset is probably counted for in many places. So if the dominoes fall, the redemption isn't quite there, but you can always go buy the underlying asset and hold it in your hardware wallet. And I think the solution is probably a combination of both, depending on where your retirements are and stuff. But, holding some Bitcoin in a hardware wallet, always going to be recommended on this show, not your keys, not your crypto.
Yeah, 1000% agree on that. As I say, you're looking at something that's completely new. It's not new to us. We've been talking about it forever. We've been talking about the ETF, for the last 3 months or so. So seeing that come to life is exciting. And I don't think that, the BlackRocks and all those folks are looking at it from a real short-term perspective. They're looking at it from a long-term perspective. It takes a little longer for that engine to get moving in terms of what you were saying, having the conversations with the clients and getting them into there. So I think we're in good shape. And I actually, as I say, I look at this as a positive opportunity overall.
Yep, for sure. So let's switch gears to Coinbase. We got a couple things going on with them. The more interesting one to me is that DCinvestor, a prominent figure on Twitter and an investor, big Ethereum person, big Bitcoin person, but especially Ethereum, was staking a lot of his Ethereum or their Ethereum on Coinbase, and he found out that basically they have like a single client staking, which I believe is Geth. So for those who don't know, on ETH there are 4 staking clients, and the beauty is that decentralization, they're written in totally different languages. So Nethermind, one of the 4, actually had a bug in it, and 9% of all ETH validators went out at the same time because of this bug. Now that's a big deal. That means that those of us who weren't on Nethermind get to validate those blocks and probably make a little more. ETH is pretty friendly about slashing. So if it goes down, you're not getting slashed right away. You're just not getting the rewards. The slashing happens more if you have 2 validators that have the same key. But, over time, my internet went out for like a week on and off, and, I actually lost money that week. So because you don't get slashed, but you kind of lose the reward that you were supposed to get. So it's kind of a double negative. But he said he's basically going off until they can branch out and have different staking clients other than just Geth. And just know that I think Geth is 78% of all of it. So it is already very centralized. My validators are on Geth, and I do want to switch at some point, but had I been Nethermind, then I would have gone down. But is Nethermind, it's now stronger because I when you make a mistake like that, I doubt you're going to make it again, or you're going to lose more people. But he's sending a strong statement to Coinbase, and you lose. If you solo validate or even go on a Lido, you make more than Coinbase gives you, because Coinbase takes 25% of the fee for the simplicity of doing it in a centralized account. But, that's a strong statement. And Brian Armstrong, to his credit, right away said, checking. Let me look into this, because you're right.
How does that touch or how does that play potentially with them being the custodians of, well, that doesn't really matter, I guess, when I'm thinking out loud. But it's interesting just to see how many companies are trusting Coinbase on the Bitcoin side of things to, be the custodian. And I think that out of the whatever it is, I think aside from Van Eck, which I think does it on Gemini, and Fidelity, which is doing it, I believe, in-house from what I was reading.
Yeah, they're doing their own.
Yeah, so it's just interesting because everything seems to be going to Coinbase, and they're really, kind of taking up a lot of the space and getting involved with so many projects that you really hope that everything's secure under the hood on that. It's a little concerning to see something tied to Ethereum that is there. So yeah, kudos to DCinvestor for calling it out, and I agree. It's cool that Brian responded right away, and that's the sort of dialogue to make things better and to have it happen. But I did see that story come out and was a little bit shook, just trying to figure out what the real implications are.
Yeah, and then on the other side, Coinbase for their court case with the SEC, the judge was extremely prepared, extremely well read, and really asked tough questions, both to the SEC and to Coinbase. But I think everybody is relieved that this judge, she's like, I'm taking this, my being a judge, very seriously, and I'm going to ask you the tough questions, because the SEC was hiding behind, these Howey tests from the 1930s. And, to her point, they simply don't apply to these new assets because these new assets weren't considered back in the 1930s, obviously. So
yeah,
this one's exciting.
Yeah, it was super cool. The judge called out in court, like, why are we looking at things, or why are we looking at rules that were made 90 years ago for things that have recently just been created? And just looking at this Elliot Stein is a Bloomberg analyst, and he was in the courtroom, and he's kind of put his take out there saying that he believes that Coinbase is now 70% likely to win full dismissal, which would be really, really massive, as we talked about on last week's show, because it's about the whole classification, and it really would nullify a lot of the SEC's position. And the SEC's been really weakened, with the within the courts, and that led to the Bitcoin approval. And people are kind of saying that if you just looked at the reasoning or rationale from the legal perspective why the Bitcoin ETF approval happened, some of the same materials are definitely in place with the Ethereum case. So when we look at the Ethereum approval, people are bullish from that side. And then with this, they're saying that they're looking at like the end of second quarter as far out as this is going to go, that this Coinbase dismissal could technically happen much sooner than that. So again, it's like, maybe I changed the name of the show to Bulls on Parade, but I keep getting very bullish about where things could be headed with kind of these new court cases, and just kind of a shift in sentiment as it feels.
Yeah, and just so everyone's aware, the court case is about these 13 tokens that are considered securities. So what Disco's referring to, if she makes a judgment then and actually did dismiss it, I think the approval for the ETH ETF seems like a foregone conclusion, unless something about staking could come in there. But I think this even kind of covers that, where it would be tough for the SEC. They really have no leg to stand on. Now, obviously, there could be appeals. This could go to trial, which part of you wants to actually see that, but it would certainly make an early judgment along that path and that trail, possibly all the way to the Supreme Court, to be certainly in Coinbase's favor, that this what the SEC doing is really frivolous and applying rules that simply can't apply to crypto, because crypto is just such an entirely different asset than traditional securities and commodities and money.
Yeah, it's exciting to see. And I don't want to be political, but it's exciting to see some forward thinking from a judicial perspective, and for somebody in that seat to be, looking at things from a critical eye and a critical lens. So that's been cool to kind of watch and understand. But we'll see how that all plays out, and we'll keep you guys updated for sure. One quick follow-up, just as we're talking SEC, because we can move on from that, is it did come out officially this week that the fake alert of, hey, the ETF's approved. Oh, no, not. It turns out that really was a SIM swap behind that, behind what happened there, and on the early leak. So it's not the best look for them. They've really taken some shrapnel if you look at the SEC over the past 12 to 18 months for sure.
Yeah, and SIM swaps again are it's so funny. So many companies, it's not funny at all, but so many companies, institutions still rely on the text message to the cell phone, and it's just the most stupid thing because SIM swapping is still the easiest vulnerability of all of them to penetrate. Authenticator apps or YubiKeys are far more effective as a 2FA than your phone, your mainline phone. And it's too bad, but the SEC, like, you should know that, like, you're the SEC, like you're talking about security, and Gary, and you're super lame blog casts or whatever you do. You're like desk time with Gary, like 4:00 with Gary. Like, it's such a dillweed. Anyway, so we won't, let's talk a little, let's not be political, but talk a little political stuff. So,
sure.
It's in America, it's going to be hard to ignore what's going on politically. People are dropping out left and right. DeSantis is already out. So Trump is the front runner. Nikki Haley's still in, I think, but it sounds like Trump and Vivek Ramaswamy are talking quite a bit, because Trump, it sounds like, is starting to echo what he says. So Disco, do you have any takes or thoughts on that?
Yeah, totally. So last night or yesterday, the New Hampshire primaries happened, and they didn't really mean anything for the Democrats. That was just like they did like a write-in thing for Biden or whatever it is. But the field for the Republican nomination went down to just two candidates, and there was thinking that Nikki Haley would be able to have a bigger showing than she did, honestly, against Trump. So Trump really did well. And then you're looking at the next big kind of thing is South Carolina, which is about a month away. So at this point, it's really a two-person race on that side.
Right.
And both Vivek and DeSantis put their support behind Trump when they backed out. But what's interesting is, as soon as Vivek dropped out, he's now being seen like on the when Trump's at the podium, Vivek's like right behind him, and you almost wonder if he's parroting things into his ear. But Trump said at a campaign rally, Vivek wanted this, and I'll say this: I will never allow the creation of a central bank digital currency. So I don't know how much Trump actually is involved with analyzing the CBDCs and the future of that, but it seems as if Vivek has now kind of gotten into the influence circle of that campaign. And it's interesting to see that we've talked about this on the show with the 50 plus million holders of crypto, and saying that could be a significant, or weight on the scale one way or the other if you're getting into a close election. That it's interesting to see him in place there, and to hear Trump putting that out there. We all know that Trump's, dabbled in NFTs over the years, and people have, seen his wallet where he had Ethereum, and then he sold some Ethereum, and I guess
he just sold a bunch of the Ethereum he got, I think, for legal fees.
Yeah, so he's got he's dabbled, and again, I never know like how much the person or the staff is involved in some of these decisions and operations, but it was certainly an interesting thing to hear Donald Trump say that he will never allow the creation of a central bank digital currency, and that just seemed to happen about a couple hours after Vivek kind of joined the camp. So it's interesting.
Yeah, and that's been a Republican, like I think the Texas governor, they've already stated that. I think DeSantis down in Florida already stated that. So, I mean, this is definitely part of at least the MAGA Republican side. Or maybe the majority of the Republican Party. That seems to be the stance. But Vivek being in there probably, if Trump wins, and we're not stating our opinion what that means either way, but if Trump wins, Vivek probably will be at least a cabinet member, maybe Treasury Secretary, and Disco is speculating maybe even VP, who knows. But Vivek certainly would be good on a crypto front. That's all I'll say on that.
Yeah, that's enough to say, but it's something to watch, right? Like, it's interesting when you start hearing candidates actually make declarations that this will never happen, and you wonder what some of the, what that does to an Elizabeth Warren or some of those folks when they start hearing that coming out of the campaign trail. And we always wanted it to, kind of get some policy, and maybe there's ways that'll come and become true to life. So definitely something to keep an eye on.
Two interesting stats for you. So global crypto holders are up 34% year to year. That's nice growth. And that is global, which is nice. We always, in the US, we're more US centric because we're so worried about the policies here and some of the anti-crypto army and stuff. So we focus here, but, Bitcoin is a global phenomena from, down to Argentina, to El Salvador. I mean, it's all over the world, and the fact that holders are up, and at some point you got to be onboarded, and there's a learning curve, obviously. But the UI UX is getting better, and it's only getting better. But I'll pair that with that 74% of crypto devs live outside of the US. So again, as much as we sometimes focus on the US, it is a global phenomenon and a necessary phenomenon now with Web3 and decentralization and holding your own tokens. So I thought those two stats together were interesting and warranted people knowing them.
Yeah, and with the growth, the overall growth, there's a quote from the researchers that did it that said the main catalyst behind Bitcoin's adoption growth was the development in Bitcoin exchange and traded funds and the introduction of the Bitcoin ordinals protocol. So it's interesting to see ordinals having an impact on the overall adoption.
Yeah, and it's interesting. Ordinals was number one for a couple weeks in a row, but that has actually shifted down again. Basically, Ethereum's got its number one slot for NFTs, which is art, PFPs, all the above. So they came in last week at 102 million in sales. Remember, it has a ton of wash trading, but it's still, even without the wash trading, is number one. Solana has come back in the number two spot. So Solana degenning and at 62 million. Then Bitcoin was third at 52 million. So it's still up there. It's still number three, and number four Polygon is super distant. So, Bitcoin ordinals and again, BRC20 tokens, which are heating up again, are here definitely to stay, which is good for me and my bags. I got into Bitcoin ordinals early, but I'm also excited about it because anything you mint on Bitcoin stays on Bitcoin forever, inscribed on that SAT for eternity. So I'm a huge fan. Yeah.
So I mean, 34% year over year growth of adoption, globally is something that can't be denied. So, as we were talking about kind of the tides changing from, the SEC perspective, from, presidential campaign perspective, from, all these different Coinbase, all this, it's like, it just does feel like we're looking at a change in tone. And again, we're just sitting down to breakfast. I'm still writing, 24 and being confused, like, oh, are we in 24, 23? So we're starting off the year. Always expectations are that things are going to go really quick, but it takes a little while for the engines to get moving for us to see all this stuff change. From the Ethereum side of things, we're looking at some news on that. A new upgrade is coming up, and it's supposed to, I think, really help to increase the speed of L2s, if I'm correct on that side of it. And I think it's called the Dencun update. I hope I pronounced that correctly.
Yeah, I think it's Dencun, but who cares? Dencun. So, yeah, this upgrade is going to make it easier for layer 2s on Ethereum. So Ethereum for L2s, for those who don't know, is the base layer, and the L2s or layer 2s are what roll up but use Ethereum at the base layer for their security. So they may validate on their own system, but eventually it gets run down to Ethereum. And basically, Denkun's going to introduce these things called blobs. And, Ethereum is a deflationary asset right now, meaning that with all the transactions that happen, there's gas that's burned. So the supply of Ethereum is actually, I think it's in the 119 million now, but it's going down ever so slightly. What this may do, people are worried that that deflationary aspect may not be quite as strong because L2s rolling into L1s will be cheaper with these blogs, aka less gas fees. So it could make Ethereum a little bit inflationary again. My take on this is it's really a non-issue because the cheaper you can make the roll-ups for L2s, the more useful the L2s become and the more activity that gets rolled to Ethereum. So if you're going to learn efficiencies for either the Ethereum L1 main chain to save on gas fees, or you're going to do that on the L2. So when they roll up to the L1s, when those get bigger and bigger and those roll-ins to Ethereum become a bigger and bigger portion of the gas burning pie, to me, it doesn't matter. It's a win because the more that rolls down and the cheaper it gets, the cheaper it is and the more people will use the chain. So, but it's cool.
Yeah. And that would be positive against the narratives over the, past months of it being too expensive and da. So that would be able to kind of calm that a little bit and to address that.
Yeah. And I don't think this one's going to be like a massive gas saver. I think that there's future updates that are coming out that are supposed to be way, way better. I believe it's called dank sharding or something like that. But this one, I think this is kind of a non-story. But Ethereum, whether it's slightly inflationary or slightly deflationary, we know that the US dollar is extremely at times very inflationary. Bitcoin is moderately inflationary. What is it, like 2% right now or whatever it is, and it's about to have in mid-April, right? So to me, Ethereum being flat or slightly inflationary at like 0.05%, like it's not a big deal. Yeah, because you want a busy chain is a healthy chain, right? So will validators get a little less from those gas fees? Yeah, maybe, but I think it'll just increase the activity. So,
well, I think it's somewhat interesting because we were talking before about the institutions and kind of are the institutions going to control Bitcoin or will Bitcoin control them? So seeing the infiltration of institutions into the space overall, you started to see, or at least there was one post out there from Van Eck that they're now going to be partners for presenting NFT Paris. And it'll just be kind of interesting to play out how institutions may start infiltrating the NFT space and see how, kind of that is either presented to their clients or how they, look to acquire or position or develop portfolio or what they do. And then it'll obviously be interesting to see what that does to, the retail collectors and kind of how they look at the space overall. So, we always heard the institutions are coming into Bitcoin and Ethereum. Now it looks as if there may be a similar stampede at some point into NFTs. So it'll be kind of fascinating to watch which collections, how they kind of look at things, how they get valued, and how they may impact the overall kind of space.
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, Van Eck being at NFT Paris and being a partner, like it's certainly a start, and they're clearly into it. Isn't Van Eck the one who has, are they HODL? Is that their ticker symbol? I think they are. So obviously they're all in. They're obviously brand positioning is trying to go for the native savvy crypto investor, I guess you will, or at least, or the degen crypto investor, right? The NFT, or we have seen along those lines, crypto punks are, they're having their moment. I think the floor was 66 the other day, ETH. So was that like $150,000, whatever it is. So crypto punks are rolling. A lot of the hoodie punks, which though there are believe it or not, that's not a super rare trade. I think 6529 and a couple other folks and the hoodie, the long sought after, if you want to be in this space, hoodie Discord chat made it a very appealing trade to own, but they were kind of dwindling a little before the new year, and now they're getting snapped up in the 200 plus ETH range. Some really good ones too. So someone is buying a lot. They're not buying the floors. They're buying some of the mid rares. So the hoodies would be considered probably high mid rares, the aliens and the apes and stuff like that are the super rares. But a lot of these are getting snapped up, and it could be wealthy investors, or I guess institutions would come in. I don't know if I see the Van X and companies like that. Like, that seems like a pretty high illiquid thing to have in a risk portfolio. But, if in 10, 15, 25, like if you look at 30 years from now, like, are Bored Apes going to be worth a lot of money? Maybe only as like a meme, or a maybe, it's on IPFS. It's not really on chain. CryptoPunks are 100% on chain. They're one of the first PFPs, and they're really, even though they weren't first, they were the one that story, the Lindy effect. The story keeps getting told, and it keeps reinforcing itself, and the price keeps reinforcing itself. Where, there was a big battle at some point last summer where apes and punks were that's Bored Apes and CryptoPunks were about the same price. It was like 50 or something, and that's as Bored Apes is coming down and punks was just slowly rising, and punks even hold in a really crappy market. So I think the jury is probably out now. Like, CryptoPunks are going to stand the test of time. Bored Apes, with all the stuff that Yuga's put out there, probably not. So it'll be interesting to see. I'm here for the art, and I'm here to hold my CryptoPunk and my Ordinal Punk and some of the other valuables for 10, 20 years. Like these short-term swings shouldn't affect anyone, because I think the long game, they're just going to be harder and harder to get.
Well, like the apes, if you look at that and you say, okay, and as you say, 10, 20, 30 years down the road, you look at it, they may represent, a fragment in time, kind of like a timestamp of, hey, this was of the mania, right? And then kind of the value of that is contingent on the brand building out and delivering, either the metaverse or games or, cultural integration from an entertainment perspective. Whereas the punks, they're just going to keep being punks and doing what they've done and what they are. So it's kind of like you don't have to rely on anything aside from what they are, what they represent, and kind of how they are. And they, for whatever reason, I mean, probably as you were talking about, that they're on chain and everything like that, but they kind of have come to represent the true, kind of OG spirit of kind of the movement on that side of it. So I think that'll probably stand the most test of time. And you're not waiting for like the CryptoPunk universe, metaverse to take over and buying plots of land in that to make sure that it's gonna go for you.
Yeah, and another way to put that is no utility is the best utility. If you're dependent on the utility of a collection like Bored Apes getting dropped Mutant Apes, and then those were worth a lot, and then you could sell your Mutant Ape and make a lot of money and still hold your Bored Ape. So that worked for Yuga for years, all the way through other deeds and codas, until it doesn't, because at some point, who gets the drop now? The codas and this other deeds, which is this virtual 3D world that Yuga's creating, where the better Bored Ape you have, the better plots of land you get. Now, the codas are taking over, and they have like 5 or 6 other drops. You got the Kennel Club, and I don't want to beat a dead horse, but like you said, it's almost like a day in time. I guess the joke would be for us, Bored Apes is like the super awesome trend of our moms all like wearing shoulder padded jackets from the 80s. Like, it was there, it was a big thing, it was big in their little circles, and now you see old pictures and you're like, that I'm not a fashion designer, but that looks ridiculous. So
it's like Linda Evans from Dynasty, I believe.
Yeah,
she would be a call out from that.
She owned it. Yeah. So again, no utility. And that's why Disco and I don't know, I'm not dragging Disco, but the more I go into on-chain stuff, the more we both speed run this together, but no utility, and having art, and that art being on chain with as few dependents as possible outside of the actual Bitcoin and Ethereum chain. To me, those are the ones that will stand the test of time. So I feel fortunate that when I had a choice to buy a CryptoPunk or a Bored Ape, when I chose, to me, it wasn't a hard decision. I chose a CryptoPunk, and I had actually we had a mutual friend we grew up with who had asked me about that. I don't know. We'll have to circle back with him if he ever bought it. I was like, we get a CryptoPunk, and this was last year.
He's more of an ape.
He really wanted a Bored Ape, and his personality was definitely more of a Bored Ape. So I hope he didn't buy one back then, because I think the Bored Apes were still at 70, 80, 90, 100 floor ETH, right? Which is a lot of money. So I'll have to circle back with him, see if he bought it. But I think the decision's been made there.
So it kind of is a perfect segue, what we were just talking about when we're looking at kind of the values that are developing in terms of, your collector DNA and what's of value to you as you evolve and learn more. And, you share some breadcrumbs with me on your path. And, I sit there and I read some of that and my mind's just completely blown, sometimes almost like hearing a new musical genre for the first time and being like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I slept on this. I got to go deep and learn more. And, I wish there were more hours in the day where I could just, really just live in a rabbit hole. But you were you talked about it a little bit last week, but you were sharing some stuff, and I think we could get into a dive on this, just on some of the things that you've uncovered recently when you're looking at things from your kind of new lens or perspective of what's valuable to you from, what's possible and how things are being put together, and, looking at some of these things from the Terraform's perspective, and, kind of teaching or educating yourself and everybody else around, on this hyperstructure notion and how that can tie into this.
Yeah.
And all that stuff. So I think it'd be a great thing to kind of analyze and talk about a little bit, because I know my mind's totally tuned into it. And once you can't unsee this stuff once you see it, as with all the stuff in this space. But now that we're looking at some of these things from an artistic lens and really trying to see what's capable, from an artistic perspective, there are people that are just way down the road on this, and it's incredibly fun to kind of catch up and learn about.
Yeah, for sure. So last week I excitedly bought a Terraform by the Math Castle group. And the really cool thing about this is, and if for those of you listening, definitely go to YouTube. We're at about 49 minutes and 15 seconds right now, plus or minus a minute. But just take a look at the picture, because it's the visuals are really cool as far as what it is. So Terraform Math Castles, you can think of them as like virtual land, but think of it as a massive art project that there are 10,000 pieces at all these different levels with all these different terrains and topographies and characters. Everything is done from the Ethereum chain. This is an entirely on-chain project. So getting into this, I'm not going to rehash, because listen to last week's episode if you want to learn a little more about these, but they're really exciting because they will live on the Ethereum blockchain as long as the Ethereum blockchain exists. So it's cool when you listen to the artist, like, obviously a Picasso or a Van Gogh painting outlived Picasso and Van Gogh, every probably 50 years or so, depending on how well it was taken care of. Experts have to touch them up, and, you have to keep the environment like perfect. Here, you don't have to do any of that. And it's a new form of art combined with coding. Because, what a lot of these NFTs that you hear about, Bored Apes, like, they're on somewhat of a centralized or slightly decentralized, where it's the metadata or the pointer, that the contract points to the metadata, which is kind of on off chain, and then the picture is also not actually on the chain, whereas all of this is generated in real time off the chain, and it changes over time. So that's just a simple overview of the terraforms and why I'm excited about it. But it allowed me to get into these things called hyperstructures. So there was a really interesting article from Jacob, and I'll hit his last name in a second, but basically talking about these hyperstructures. So on the blockchains, you can have, just like the art you just saw, I would consider that a hyperstructure because it doesn't take nothing has to be done except for the chain just has to keep running. And that data and that art and that information is there. And it actually, based on some chain properties of Ethereum, subtly morphs and changes over time. And that's what makes on-chain art so beautiful. So I would consider that, it's art, but I would consider that a hyperstructure. It is immutable. It can't be changed. Whether the artist dies or not, it will live on into infinity. So a hyperstructure defined is a crypto protocol that can run for free and forever without maintenance, interruption, or intermediaries. And why this is, so basically the properties that Jacob is espousing is like, it's unstoppable. The protocol can't be stopped because as long as the blockchain exists, it keeps running. It's free. Just like terraforms, there's a 0% protocol wide fee that nothing needs to be done. Now, if you make changes to it, you might have to pay gas fees if you try and alter the contract in some ways, but otherwise it just runs forever. It accrues value, which is accessible and exitable by the owners. It's expansive. There's built-in incentives for participants in the protocol. It's permissionless, universally accessible. So you get the point. Like, it is just out there. And I loved this take of this hyperstructure, because if you think like the example that's been tossed around, because there's people who disagree with these hyperstructures and that they're possible. Now, I think from an art perspective, I think we've seen it. It's possible, but art isn't necessarily like a free social good that anybody can just tap into and use. So let's switch gears to Uniswap. For those who don't know what Uniswap is, that is where basically, think of the stock market where you have your market makers. If you want to sell some Ethereum and get into, I don't know, Rocket Pool or whatever ERC20 token that's on the Ethereum chain, and there's thousands of them, Uniswap allows you to swap, and the Uniswap protocol does not currently charge any fee for this. People can fork it, they can tap off of it, but it's a very powerful tool. So this person is saying that like every single type of thing, so whether it's futures trading or options or swapping tokens like Uniswap is doing, these hyperstructures exist, and then people can kind of build on those, and they'll be valuable forever, but they'll be free forever. So it's an interesting concept. So from a utopian standpoint, it's kind of what I think dreamers and people who want to make the world a better place than they found it, is that when these things are out there and they're free to use, then you don't have institutions in the way. You don't have these toll takers like Apple's closed system or Google's closed system. Like all these systems are Facebook's closed social system. People can just go in and swap tokens and they're free to use. Now, the people who are providing the liquidity for the tokens can set the little fee that they're going to charge for holding a bulk amount of your Rocket Pool and your Ethereum, so they can manage those swaps and get a fee taker toll, which is such a cool way to kind of make money. Whereas in Wall Street, you've actually got like these small private companies. I think there's only a couple of them that set the market and they get the fees. Well, that's obviously very centralized. It's a very necessary tool to keep the stock market flowing properly, because you always need a buyer and a seller, and you've got to have them meet somewhere in the middle. But here, those market makers is someone who's just making a very tiny percentage as you swap in and out of tokens. So it's very fluid that permeates across the world. So the question becomes, beyond art, can we have a hyperstructure that serves as this base public good, we'll call it on the Ethereum blockchain, like Uniswap, be free forever? And then, it can be built on, and those things that build on top of it can extract tolls. But is that a possibility? And Jacob's argument is yes. And then there were counter arguments that is no, because Uniswap has a token, right? And a lot of people speculate and buy this Uniswap token. Obviously they get to vote on governance, but let's be honest, I'm sure Hayden and a lot of the insiders on the foundation and A16Z hold a ton of these tokens. So you're probably going to it's going to be tough to outvote them, right? But a lot of people buy that token in hopes that one day Uniswap turns on the fee, so just a little fraction of it goes to the Uniswap token holder almost as a dividend, right? So, but the problem is, if that happens, then the whole Uniswap, which it already has, Sushi Swap, and there's plenty of others, but it can be easily forked. So there's a lot of pieces here. I want to take a pause here because I just shared a lot of stuff. This is a work in progress, but this is kind of what I'm trying to understand. Can you make something that lives immutably forever on the blockchain called a hyperstructure that remains free forever and that people can then build on top of and build businesses on top of? It's a beautiful concept, but is there such thing as a free lunch?
That is the most rooted in decentralization ethos, as possible, if you really break that down. So you're essentially saying that Terraforms and some of those other projects are representing the feasibility of the hyperstructure from an art perspective. And we're asking, will it also be something that can be a utility perspective for others to build on within the Ethereum ecosystem overall? And can they maintain that purity, over through the end of time? So it really is like an incredible thought exercise to just think of, the scope of the notion of having something that's unstoppable forever, free forever, expansive, permissionless, all those traits. Can that really come to life and be validated over years and years and years? And what could that possibly lead to in terms of offshoots and things to be developed from that base? Is that kind of where we're at with this?
Yeah. Can you make tools that, build on top of that doesn't degrade over time? Because think about it, like Facebook, when it was, when people were in college or when we were in our 20s, like there was a period where Facebook was kind of cool, and and then everyone's mothers got on and fathers got on, and then it was like it became kind of instantly uncool. Now Facebook is obviously still huge, but is Facebook creating value for all of us? It creates a utility for us, but the value on our privacy and on ads and everything obviously is captured by them. And one could argue, if we both said, is Facebook going to be around and as dominant in 20, 30 years? My guess would probably be it'll be around in some capacity, but probably no, right? Will Google search, with all the large language models and the AI coming out right now, will they be as dominant in 10, 20 years? And with the moves they've made and all that corporate bureaucracy, probably not. They may surprise us, but probably not, right? So over time, my point is like, systems degrade and newer ones spring up and get better. But the problem right now is, Web 2 world, the value capture, I can obviously invest in Apple stock, and the more iPhones they sell at a higher margin, the more that stock is worth, and then the more my net worth is worth. But over time, Apple will change and be disrupted by other companies, and the big question is, and this is something we'll look into more, we don't have to solve it today, but can you make something that literally doesn't degrade over time, that sits as a base layer on chain, that is simply a public good that can be built upon? Like, I guess you could think of Ethereum itself and Bitcoin itself, or any good chain, as that base layer public good. Now it extracts fees for transactions and things that you do on it. And if they didn't, then the spam would be out of control anyway. So you want it to extract fees. That's a feature, not a bug, but it's a cool thought exercise. Can you have these systems that don't degrade over time, that make humanity a better place, that actually remains valuable for not only the either the creators or the users, and everybody?
So kind of like, can you have something be able to operate infinitely without influence, right? Like, that's really kind of where it's at, where it is I guess you get into the permissionless side of it or whatever, where something can be just deployed purely and just continue to do that without influence, changing the mechanisms or whatever's happening with it. So yeah, wow. And then I do think
there's one piece that I want to answer that question before you go on. This is where the people who are pushing back saying it's impossible, because it has to retain its value, which is accessible and exitable by the owners. So can that value continue? Because if Uniswap put in a fee, let's say they put in a 2% fee, obviously there would be more forks. You already have SushiSwap and other forks, but people would go away from that. Now, if it was a little fee, there's probably a number where people would stick around a while, until the next one comes up, and then they'd lower the fee. So the race is to zero. So this is where the pushback is from other thought leaders, that you cannot keep the unstoppable and free and retain the value. At some point, you have to capture the value as the owner, in which case then it would probably fork. So you're kind of back to it. Is it a public good, or is it just a new business model? But so go ahead with your second question. I just wanted to make that point clear, because it's still coming into focus for me as well.
Yeah, no, it's a lot to digest. It's not a quick hit for anything, but I do think that it's interesting that from a use case or from a, perspective, art is kind of showing that yes, it could be done if you look at it from, the Terraform's manifestation of it. Like, so maybe not from maybe there's differences from like a business or financial side of things, if you look at it that way, but from purely being able to provide, almost a canvas for people to be able to create art off of, though that purity seems like has kind of come to life, and that's very exciting to kind of wrap your head around.
Remember, I put the Terraforms came out before this concept. There's actually a math concept called Hyperstructures, which I assume there's some relation there, but Terraforms came out, and a lot of this immutable on-chain art came out before this concept. This is really more for like utility and stuff like that. I just think where it does work personally is for art. I guess the same argument can be made, but is that valuable for all time? Terraforms are only valuable if a bunch of us agree that it's cool art and valuable. So I guess that becomes very subjective. So I just want to say that the chicken did come before the egg in this one. The art before it was defined and all the on-chain art came before this concept, but now they're trying to bring this hyperstructure concept. Like, is this a possibility? And this person who's trying to kind of rain on his parade, Connor McCormick, he is into public social goods. He wants this to work. So he's finding holes in it because he wants to, create public utility. I mean, the analogy they gave was like, you have a park, you sell pancakes once a year at a big fair in the park, and that manages the paths and the playground equipment and all that stuff. So one could argue you've got this nice little flywheel of generating the revenue that then people appreciate the park to then make the park better. But if the park gets way bigger and goes for hundreds of miles, well, that may not be enough, and the people still have to show up on a nice day to buy their pancakes. So it's more of a social good that people buy into, and not necessarily a self-fulfilling flywheel hyperstructure that doesn't even need the people to show up to keep that flywheel running.
Well, obviously it would take significant vision from the creator or the originator of, a hyperstructure to be able to really kind of predict, how things will evolve over time. And, if you're really looking at for the end of time, all these really powerful, those characteristics, like it's a really intense thing to think about, being able to project how things could be utilized and developed, from an infinite perspective. We're talking about people that, are thinking they're visionary, looking, 3 to 6 months out on things. But here you really have to look, you're looking at centuries, and, that's fascinating because it ties into just the evolution of everything. And are you able to deploy something into the atmosphere that will be relevant and will make sense, so many years down the road is an interesting thing to consider.
Yeah, it was interesting and kind of related as we transition. Polinia, one of his last posts, was talking about like AI, like at some point blockchains might just be this stepping stone to not even being necessary in the future if AI really does get so smart and kind of accurately collects our more true information to make society better. It can almost validate on its own. And someone made it a really good counterpoint to that. It said at some point you would think the blockchains would be even more important because it needs a fundamental base structure spine in which to see what the actual truths were. So I really liked that second take, that you can't have this all omniscient AI like in the book Scythe, where it just knows everything and knows perfectly how to balance humanity, if you don't have the underpinning public truth of the order of things were purchased in the blockchain. So, tying that into all of this with the hyperstructures, I that to me is pretty bullish for blockchains, whether they evolve a ton or not over time, as being this foundational basis for information moving on, with AI as me almost like a UI UX layer that just makes it more seamless, because you can just ask your phone through voice or through text or however you do it to help you answer questions.
Okay. I don't have a quick retort to that.
and you don't have to. So wow. I'm excited. Let's shift gears and move on. So again, a big part of what we like to do is weave. All stories are interrelated. All our lives are interrelated. I'm just going to say it, we're all one, in the great universal spirit. So Disco, do you want to start with this one?
Sure. It's a little bit of a tone shift from, the hyperstructure and Terraform side of things, but I've been looking at, and this kind of goes against some of the stuff we've been talking about, but I still go back to the fundamental part of NFT collecting, where I am as a newbie, kind of looking to kind of see what I like. And I'm still at the stage where I'm like, what hits emotionally, like what resonates with me? I'm still somewhat in the quest for a PFP. And then I'm also looking at, as we kind of started the show off, with Ethereum, its price going down a bit tied to the Bitcoin stuff. It's like, okay, this could be an opportunity to, kind of bargain shop and look for some things that resonate with me. And I found a NFT that I picked up last week, and I'm super excited about the reveal because there's just something about it that just kind of rings happiness into my soul. So I really feel excited about it, and maybe we could reveal it now, and I could get some reaction from you on this. There we
Da,
go.
da, da, da. So I had to
There
pull it
we
up
go.
before, but a Nakamigo. So for those who aren't looking, it has a blue jersey, orange stripes on the side. It is very pixelated in a cool way, and it has the numbers 34 etched on it. So having Disco and I, Blutoshi, formerly Chicago, we both grew up in the Chicagoland area. So the Walter Payton jersey is in full show with the headphones, which is a very nice touch, and the purple glasses. And the one thing around the neck is that like I don't want to belittle your care. Is that a choker, or is that part of the headphones? Is that like the mouthpiece?
See, it spoke to me on so many levels that when I saw it, I thought it was like my little soul patch. So that's what I identified it as. However, I think it's a wraparound mouthpiece to the headset would be what I would think.
I think it is too. Let's just see. Okay, it's gaming headset. Yeah, so that's super cool. And it, you're doing podcasts now, which is great. And you've been a DJ for so long. And the Walter Payton homage. Yeah, this one. Yes. I got to say I'm a little, and 2112, it's a palindrome. It's not going to be go number 2112. So the people that did MFers, which is CCO, basically open license to use. Anybody can use the picture. Anybody could do whatever they want with it. And I'm a huge fan of CC0, actually. Nakamigos were made by that group or that team, if you will. That loose collection, and that is one of their more recent releases, and I'm a big fan of those. I don't own one myself, but I love the art, and I applaud you. This is super, super cool.
Well, I've been on the quest to find something that resonates, right? And I don't live in Chicago anymore, but it's always been home, so I have a huge draw to that. But it led me to the question of, if you look at iconic Chicago, and we're going to go a little Chicago sportsy here, but if you go into like the most iconic numbers in jerseys, to me, there's always been a battle, and there's been one naming, number 23, and Michael Jordan has always kind of had the biggest, kind of headlines in international. But my heart's always gone with 34. Like I could almost tear up, like when I hear Walter Payton talk. Like he just was the purest, like such a beautiful soul. And from growing up the same time as I, like it was tough with like him and Matsui, and it'd be like, okay, we're either going to throw a screen pass to Matsui for 3 yards, or we're going to make Payton run it again. And he was just took on so much weight, and he was always so positive about it that I just think that it's a great spirit animal for me. And I felt really excited when I saw the headphones part. That's what took me over the edge. And then I kind of like the glasses because they kind of remind me of like ravey stuff, and I kind of have always been interested in that side of things. So it's not something that's going to change the accounts forever, be a big money situation. But
I don't know. It doesn't matter. It matters. No, but it was with you.
Yeah. Like it was, I had that, which we all remember. I just had that giddy feeling when I was like, wait, I can get it. And I'm like, I got it. And I was like, yay. And I'm like, I wanted to, share and text you. And I'm like, but I'll save it for the show. So
that's awesome. That's a really good one too. Cause I was looking at the number 34s, like different Nakamigos, but this one I think is definitely cooler than the ones that I was always looking at. Like this one's a steal. So congratulations.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of that one. So, well, cool. Well, that's exciting. So we got Nakamigos on the table. The big question is, you've got an MFer, you love your MFer with the cool blue background. Are you going to switch it to the Payton Nakamigo?
I think so. Yeah, I'm not signing a contract, but I think that, in light of trying to, put our time into the show. Like, I like the element of the headphones, although the MFer does have headphones. So now I'm starting to realize that subconsciously I must be pulled towards headphones when I'm looking at potential PFPs. So maybe that's part of an identity thing that I've been interested in.
So the last part of our show that's going to be exciting to talk about, Ryan Sean Adams of Bankless just came out. Disco, do you want to cue this one up?
I'll work on it. Yeah. So he just tweeted out today that he made a proposal to the Bankless DAO, and the Bankless DAO, I haven't been involved with, and I don't know if it means that you're a citizen if you have a Bankless DAO, because it's hard for me, and this is not a dig on anyone, but it's hard for me with some of these established media sort of entities within the crypto space to know which thing they're talking about. It's either you're a member of this, or you're a member of this, or you're behind the paywall, and that goes for a couple different things. But today he tweeted out that he just posted a proposal to burn or return all the bank tokens ever allotted to Trustless State, him, and Bankless overall. So basically, the leadership of Bankless is now saying that they're interested in burning or returning the tokens that they've amassed as part of this operation. And I don't really understand the benefit that it would give to the community necessarily. And I'm not really understanding.
I don't think it benefits the community at all. I think it benefits. I think he and David and Bankless HQ got a ton of flack for having this, because they're always talking about other shit coins, and this was a complete shit coin, and they owned collectively was it like 20% of the entire collection. And he's basically saying here, oh, we didn't earn it anyway. They're basically taking a step back because they've been getting so much flack from this, and they're making so much money from investments and from their advertisers that this just isn't worth their time. Where I take umbrage with it is, you had to. So I have been a Bankless member, and I wrote comedy for The Rug, and it was fun. And
right.
I'm glad I did it. I stand by it. But I had to buy, I don't remember how many tokens I had to buy, but at the time it was like $5,000 or $6,000 to get into this. You had to buy the tokens in order to be validated in the Discord or wherever we met to do this stuff. And, they were a part of this whole setup, and those tokens, like everything in the bear market in 2023, just went literally to zero. I mean, I think I bought them at maybe a couple cents per bank, and they went to 0.0000482. Like, they went virtually to zero. So, my big question for him is, if the DAO plans on redeeming all the ETH and the losses that we had, who had to participate in the DAO. So they're obviously separating themselves further and further from the Bankless DAO. They certainly don't want any flack from this, this fallout, because Bankless DAO made a proposal to a client, and it was a very high for how much reach Bankless DAO gets. You remember, Bankless HQ is the big podcast that we all know. Yeah. Bankless DAO doesn't have hardly any reach at all, and they wanted a lot of money for having very little reach. And obviously everyone's like, yeah, wink, wink. You also get to be on the podcast and probably mentioned all over the place. So that's when these guys separated themselves. So to me, it's just them. Like, they probably have handlers now. They've got investors who are making a lot of money with them and for them. And I think they're just tightening up legally so their surface vector of attack is less and less and less. And probably from a personal standpoint, their attack vector is less, because a lot of people are giving them a lot of flack for being kind of sellouts and over advertising. And, as much as I loved learning from them, the nuances of Ethereum, like, I stopped listening to them because they're shilling more of their stuff, and you don't know when it's a shill or when it's not, unless you have their spreadsheets open of all their advertisers and everything that they invest in. It's just not worth it to me.
So is this a polite rug?
I don't think so. I think it's them just, I don't know how involved they were in the making of the Bankless DAO and the token. They say, of course, like, oh, these other people created it, and because we're Bankless, we had a 20% cut of all these tokens.
That's ridiculous.
Right. It's not adding. Right. It's not adding up. So they're basically saying they're burning all the tokens that Bankless HQ and Ryan and David were supposed to get, which they've never touched. They're burning it. They want to separate themselves from this. I don't think, so I guess you're right. They certainly aren't intending it to be a rug. They're intending it to be we want nothing to do with this headache. And it's a headache. It went to, that token value went up to a couple cents, which doesn't sound like much, but there was a billion of these stupid things. Yeah. And then they went to 0.00000, it's like penny stocks or shit coins. Like it went to zero. So a lot of people in the Bankless community and a lot of people listening to their show are giving them flack, and they deserve it. And they still deserve it. This is just them separating themselves from it. And I don't know if I'd go as far as to call it a rug. I don't think that was their intention when they set it up, because all this DAOs are so new anyway, but it's certainly, I guess on paper, it certainly feels like one. So I guess I'm separating their intention from what it is, but yeah, it's a total rug.
Yeah. Cause if you look at, it doesn't matter if the token price or whatever is 0.001 or whatever, if you were mandated to purchase, $5,000 worth of it to be able to have, the access to do what you wanted to do within it, that's a gatekeep. It doesn't matter what the token value is. They still had a USD equivalent to what you had to do. So it's completely ridiculous. And then to just be like, hey, we're walking. Well, what does that do for folks that, bought into it? I don't like it at all.
Go ahead.
Oh, please.
I think they're in sellout phase, honestly. Like, that's not how they would see it, but I think they've gotten so much flack from community. And remember, it's not like a lot of people probably still love listening to their show. It's always the loudest voices that you think represents like the majority. It probably doesn't, but and I wasn't going to call them out left and right because I learned a lot from them, but I also knew when it was time to walk away from, because they're shilling too much. And I think they're almost like, you know what? We can't please everybody. We're investors now, and we're moving on, and we're going to report what we find interesting. And I guess, unfortunately for their audience, a lot of what they find quote unquote interesting is their own investments, which then, their whole stance in the last year we're not a news organization. And that was the right take to take. But now if you really listen to them, they're so heavily weighted with their own investments and advertisers. And, you can't not have a biased take. If someone's advertising on your show, you're always going to at least light glove it, or at least give them the benefit of the doubt and try and look at all sides. So, which is fine. But I think, you get what Bitcoin did with Peter McCormack, and he looks at macro trends in Bitcoin, and, he's got sponsors like Iris Energy and a bunch, and he generally keeps them very separate from the content of the show. And that's what I would expect from someone who's reporting on what's happening in crypto. Like to me now, they're just, it's pure shill.
So full disclosure, I did drop into a roll up last week. And one thing that would have probably irked both of us if we listened together was one of the hosts made a point to say that he was listening to the other host doing a, take or something, and had to let everybody know that he was speeding quite quickly across Patagonia when he was listening. So it's just hearing all these, I'm such a, it's like, all right, dude, that's not relevant to what we're talking about. We don't need to hear, how adventurous and crazy you're searching the globe for all these things. Like that's more
not like how it's really how insecure you are, right? I mean,
why do that drop, right? Like
Yeah. And you know what? But like I said, lots of value over the years, just not for me anymore. And I think a lot of people who have been in crypto, and hopefully newer people, aren't going to get takes from them, because if when you first came in crypto, Bankless is probably the first thing I recommended to you, and probably
Yeah.
what Bitcoin did, and probably NLW or one of those guys. And now if I recommended Bankless to someone, I think they would get a very skewed, weird take of what's important, like hunting for airdrops. Like it's
Yeah.
just pure an eigenlayer, which eigenlayer has, there's some interesting aspects to it, but it feels double derivative degen on ETH staking to me. So it's like I think their compass, whether they realize it or not, has gone wayward, but I wish them the best, and I think they've served their needs, but now it's time to move on. It's time to recommend other shows, and thus a big reason why we're here, honestly. So
Yeah, 100%. I will go into the something good section because it does
okay.
line up to what you're saying to a degree. And this actually had kind of its impetus from the beginning of our show last week. And in that, Blutoshi somewhat scolded me for not having a handle on silencing unknown callers on my phone, and subsequently recommended a few more notification silencing aspects. And we actually decided during the show, or I decided during the show, I took off my Apple Watch and threw it across the room because I was like, why am I beholden to these notifications and these distractions? And from that point, now that I'm sans Apple Watch and sans notifications and spam calls, I have been able to find so much more focus and time
Oh,
to develop thoughts and to be able to see things through without being, taken to the right or to the left with this, that, or the other. So just from the pruning aspect, which we've talked about, from your X feed to whatever it may be, I'm just saying there's something really good in looking at ways to prune your distractions and to be able to tune out things that aren't of value or use to you at this time. There was a time when, Bankless was very valuable to me. Right now, it's not something that I need to have on my agenda, and I need to dedicate time to,
right.
give that energy to. So the something good is that there are ways to kind of develop your day-to-day life to be able to help you tune out things that aren't relevant. And I think that in this day and age, that's incredibly important. And it was it was a great validation to see it in practice and to see results in a short period of time. So I would say that is my something good. And I will be looking at other ways to deploy that sentiment in the coming days and other aspects. So that's what I got there.
Yeah, I love that. That's super cool because, like I said, we always pick up our cell phones regardless, and we're addicted to them. It's good that you're getting more into the pull than not the push, right? So,
yeah. As always, this show is really for entertainment purposes. It's for, learning together. However, nothing that we say is intended to be financial advice. We encourage everybody always to do their own research and to be smart about how they deploy anything they have, and make sure you don't get over your skis and invest anything that you can't afford to lose. But all that being said, we really appreciate everybody being on this journey with us. Again,
absolutely.
if you'd like to do us the favor of,
Do
subscribing,
it.
liking, commenting, it would be appreciated. And from where I sit, I'd like to say thanks for the time, and we look forward to connecting next week.
Yep. Take care, everybody. Bye bye.